Hello, and welcome to Miss Melnick's second Tiny Desk Bedtime Story. I wanted to share with you this picture of myself. This is a picture of me and a bull whose name is Rufus. This is me and Rufus hanging out under a palm tree at the South Tampa farm. Now, boys and girls, the reason why I share this with you is because I'm going to read to you one of my favorite stories ever. I'm going to be sharing with you a lot of different stories. In fact, I have shared with you already this story called Let's Have a Store. Now, you might remember that when I read this book to you, one of the reasons why it was one of my favorites is because I really enjoyed the way that the pages went up, and each time you got a different page, you added more to the store. This is another book that I had since I was a little girl, and it's called Frady Cat. And inside of each page, there's a hole, and the cat's in there. Maybe one day I'll share that book with you too. But today, I want to share with you the story of Ferdinand. This book, this actual book right here, is not an old book. This is a book that my parents gave to my daughter when she was just a few weeks old. And my daughter's about to turn 19. So this is actually kind of an old book, even though it's not really an old book. Now this is an old book. This book is actually a real book since my mom was a little girl. 1936 is when this book was made. And you can see in the bottom of it, it's got some little teeth marks. There's some more teeth marks up here. We've had dogs over the years. This is a book that has been read many, many times. I fell asleep with it on the bed. The dog chewed on it. Some of the pages are ripped. Some of them are basically kind of rotten from the inside. But this is one of my favorite stories, and I've loved it since I was very, very little. I used to ask my mom to read me this story all the time. And then there's another thing that I want to share with you. This is a piece of cork. You're going to find in this story that I'm going to read to you about a place that Ferdinand likes to go and sit, and that's under a cork tree. Now, I was really lucky as a child. We were able to go and do some traveling, and when we went to Spain, I made my mom tell me whenever we saw trees if this was a cork tree or not a cork tree. And this is actually the bark, so it's real cork from a cork tree. Now, I've had this since I was 10 years old, and I'm about to turn 50. So this piece of cork is 40 years old. I've moved it with me from different houses. It's a very special piece of cork. It's kind of nothing, but it always makes me think about this story, and this is one of my favorite stories from when I was a little girl. So I'm going to share this book with you. Give me just a moment while I adjust the book and the pages and the camera. So this is the story of Ferdinand, and I think that that's right there in the middle. Now, when you're seeing it appear on the TV, I'm actually reading it from this other book, and the reason why I do that is because the program that I'm using puts all the words backwards, so I can't read it backwards. I'm a pretty smart girl, but reading books backwards is not something that I'm very good at doing. So I'm going to be turning the pages back here. You can see me. I'm going to be turning the pages back here and turning the pages up here at the same time. So if I get a little bit out of sync, bear with me. All right. The Story of Ferdinand by Monroe Leaf. And these pictures were illustrated by Robert Lawson. And again, like I said, this book is from 1936. If you can figure out how old this book is, make sure that you put that in the comments for me. My dad was born in the year 1936. That's a hint if I've ever told you how old my dad is. Once upon a time in Spain, there was a little bull, and his name was Ferdinand. All of the other little bulls he lived with would run and jump and butt their heads together. but not Ferdinand. He liked to sit just quietly and smell the flowers. He had a favorite spot out in the pasture under a cork tree. It was his favorite tree, and he would sit in its shade all day and smell the flowers. Now, do you remember my piece of cork? It looks very different than the way the illustrator made the cork in the cork tree. But if you're the illustrator for a book, you can make things look like whatever you want it to be. Sometimes his mother, who was a cow, would worry about him. She was afraid he would be lonesome all by himself. "Why don't you run and play with the other little bulls and skip and butt your head?" she would say. But Ferdinand would shake his head. "I like it better here, where I can sit just quietly and smell the flowers." His mother saw that he was not lonesome, and because she was an understanding mother, even though she was a cow, she let him just sit there and be happy. As the years went by, Ferdinand grew and grew until he was very big and strong. All the other bulls who had grown up with him in the same pasture would fight each other all day. They would butt each other and stick each other with their horns. What they wanted most of all was to be picked to fight at the bullfights in Madrid. But not Ferdinand. He still liked to sit just quietly under the cork tree and smell the flowers. One day, 5 men came in very funny hats to pick the biggest, fastest, roughest bull to fight in the bullfights in Madrid. All the other bulls ran around snorting and butting, leaping and jumping, so the men would think that they were very, very strong and fierce and pick them. Ferdinand knew that they wouldn't pick him, and he didn't care, so he went out to his favorite cork tree to sit down. He didn't look where he was sitting, and instead of sitting on the nice cool grass in the shade, he sat on a bumblebee. Well, if you were a bumblebee and a bull sat on you, what would you do? You would sting him, and that's just what this bee did to Ferdinand. Wow, did it hurt! Ferdinand jumped up with a snort. He ran around, puffing and snorting, butting and pawing the ground as if he were crazy. The 5 men saw him, and they all shouted with joy. Here was the largest and fiercest bull of all, just the one for the bullfights in Madrid. So they took him away for the bullfight day in a cart. And what a day it was. Flags were flying, bands were playing, and all of the lovely ladies had flowers in their hair. They had a parade into the bull ring. First came the banderilleros. with long, sharp pins with ribbons on them to stick the bull and make him mad. Next came the picadores, who rode skinny horses, and they had long spears to stick in the bull and make him madder. Then came the matador, the proudest of them all. He thought he was very handsome and bowed to the ladies. He had a red cape and a sword and was supposed to stick the bull last of all. Then came the bull, and you know who that was, don't you? Ferdinand. They called him Ferdinand the Fierce, and all the bandolieros were afraid of him, and the picadores were afraid of him, and the matador was scared stiff. Ferdinand ran to the middle of the ring, and everyone shouted and clapped because they thought he was going to fight fiercely and butt and snort and stick his horns around. But not Ferdinand. When he got to the middle of the ring, he saw the flowers in all the lovely ladies' hair, and he just sat down quietly and smelled. He wouldn't fight and be fierce, no matter what they did. He just sat and smelled. And the banderilleros were mad, and the picadores were madder, and the matador was so mad he cried because he couldn't show off with his cape and sword. So they had to take Ferdinand home. And for all I know, he is sitting there still, under his favorite cork tree, smelling the flowers, just quietly. And he is very happy. The end. Boys and girls, thank you for letting me share with you one of my favorite stories of all time. Letting me share with you my piece of cork, and for letting me share with you a picture of my favorite bull named Rufus. And I'm wondering if you could share with me, what's your favorite place to sit just quietly? Good night.